How your brain tricks you into being scared, the science of psychological fear. What you just saw may not have been real. What you just heard might have never happened. But your brain, your own brain, built a story, a convincing one detailed enough, vivid enough, that your body responded to it as if it were completely true. Your heart rate went up, your muscles tensed, your breath changed, and you had no say in any of it. Tonight, we're not talking about monsters, we're not talking about jump scares or haunted houses. We're talking about something far more unsettling, the mechanism inside your own mind that generates fear, whether you want it to or not. Why fear ignores logic. Here's something most people don't realize about fear. By the time you consciously register that you're scared, it's already too late. The response has already been triggered. Your body is already in motion. This is because of a small, almond-shaped structure deep inside your brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala doesn't wait for permission. When your senses detect something that could be a threat, a shadow, a sound, a face that looks slightly wrong, the amygdala fires immediately. It sends distress signals to your body in milliseconds. Adrenaline floods your system. Your pupils dilate. Blood rushes to your muscles. All of this happens before the rational part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, has even had time to process what you actually saw. Neuroscientists call this the amygdala hijack. And here's the part that should make you uncomfortable. The amygdala doesn't distinguish between real threats and imagined ones. It responds to the perception of danger, not danger itself. A tiger in front of you, a vivid nightmare about a tiger, a movie scene with a tiger. Neurologically, the fear response is nearly identical. Your brain evolved to keep you alive, not to be accurate. And in a world where hesitation could mean death, that made sense. But it also means your fear system is running on hardware that was built for a very different world, and it misfires constantly. The presence hallucination. In 2014, researchers at the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne published a study with a finding that should have been front-page news. They had discovered the neurological mechanism behind one of the most universally reported and least talked about human experiences. The feeling that someone is standing behind you when no one is there. You've felt it. Almost everyone has. That sudden, absolute certainty that there is a presence just outside your field of vision. You turn around, nothing. For centuries, this was filed under the supernatural. Ghost sightings, hauntings, spiritual encounters. The reality is more interesting and more disturbing. The researchers induced this feeling deliberately in a lab using a robotic system. Participants wore a blindfold and controlled a robotic arm in front of them. That arm simultaneously touched their back, but with a slight time delay. The mismatch between expected touch and actual touch caused the brain to generate a phantom, a presence. Subjects didn't just feel vaguely uneasy, they were convinced someone was behind them. Some asked the researchers to stop because the feeling was too overwhelming. The brain had created a person out of nothing but a timing error. What this tells us is that our sense of who is in the room is not a direct perception of reality. It is a model constructed by the brain, and that model can be wrong. Cases of the presence hallucination are documented in mountaineers at extreme altitude, people in sensory deprivation, patients with Parkinson's disease, and survivors of life-threatening events. It is not a glitch. It is the brain, working exactly as designed, pattern matching so aggressively that it generates a pattern where none exists. The Nocebo Effect. Most people have heard of the placebo effect, the idea that a fake treatment can produce real healing because the patient believes it will work. What most people don't know is that the exact opposite is also true. It's called the Nocebo Effect, and it is one of the most disturbing demonstrations of the mind's power over the body ever documented. Here's the core finding. If you believe something will harm you, your body will generate real, measurable physical symptoms, even if the thing itself is completely inert. In clinical trials, patients given sugar pills and told they might experience nausea, headaches, or fatigue report nausea, headaches, and fatigue at significantly higher rates than patients told nothing. In one documented case from the 1970s, a man named Vance was enrolled in a clinical drug trial for antidepressants. After a breakup, he took an overdose of his trial medication, 29 pills. He arrived at the hospital in critical condition. His blood pressure was crashing. He was barely conscious. Doctors worked to stabilize him for 4 hours. Then they discovered the truth. Vance had been in the placebo group. The pills contained nothing. His body had nearly killed itself, responding to what he believed he had taken. The nocebo effect goes further than individual cases. Researchers studying mass psychogenic illness, what used to be called mass hysteria, have documented entire communities developing shared physical symptoms with no shared physical cause. Factories where dozens of workers collapsed after one person reported feeling sick. Schools where hundreds of students developed rashes, nausea, and dizziness with no toxin ever found. The mechanism is the same as individual nocebo, belief, transmitted socially, producing real biology. And this is the part that matters for our purposes tonight. Fear is belief. When you are afraid of something truly afraid, you are, in part, manufacturing a physiological reality from a cognitive one. The racing heart, the shortness of breath, the tunnel vision, your brain ordered all of it. Based on a story, it told itself. Fear is a learned pattern, and it can be unlearned. If everything we've discussed tonight points to one conclusion, it's this. Fear is not a fixed trait. It is a learned pattern, and learned patterns can be changed. This isn't self-help language. This is neuroscience. The brain operates on a principle called neuroplasticity, the ability to physically rewire its own connections based on experience. Every time you experience a fear response, the neural pathway associated with that fear gets slightly stronger, more myelinated, more automatic. But the reverse is also true. Every time that pathway fires without the catastrophic outcome the brain predicted, it weakens slightly. This is the foundation of systematic desensitization, one of the most well-researched psychological treatments ever developed. The process is straightforward. Gradual, controlled exposure to the feared stimulus paired with a relaxation response teaches the amygdala that the trigger is not actually dangerous. With enough repetition, the fear response diminishes, not because the person decided to stop being afraid, but because the brain updated its threat model based on new evidence. Cognitive reframing works on a different level. It targets the story, the prefrontal cortex tells about the fear rather than the amygdala's raw response. By repeatedly interrupting and replacing catastrophic interpretations with accurate ones, the brain gradually builds new narrative pathways that compete with the fear loop. None of this is fast. None of it is easy. But it confirms something profound. The brain that built your fear built it through experience, through repetition, through learned association, can unbuild it the same way. The architecture of fear is not permanent. It just feels that way from the inside. We started tonight with a simple idea, that the things that scare you most might not be real, that your brain is capable of generating terror from nothing, from a timing error, from a belief, from a pattern it learned so long ago you can't remember the original lesson. The amygdala fires before you can think. The presence appears behind you with no one there. Your body responds to a story as if it were biology. And yet, knowing all of this, does it make the fear go away? Probably not, not immediately. But understanding the machinery changes your relationship to it. You are not being attacked by the dark. You are being attacked by a model of the dark, one your own brain constructed for reasons that once made sense. And models can be rewritten. Now you know the truth. The thing that makes unreal things feel real is the story your brain writes for you without asking.